On Triple M, you're listening to Rural Focus. My name's Holly. And we're joined by Dr Danielle Gale, Director of Plant Farm TerraWise. Triple R Network, we like to check in with the lovely ladies that are doing amazing things in regional areas. So Danielle works with farmers across WA on practical business and carbon decisions. And she's recently written 6 lessons from the Paddock, an article about what really works on farm. Good morning, Danielle. How are you going?
Morning, Holly. Really well. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into it, I'd love you to tell us a bit about yourself and what you do at TerraWise and how you sort of ended up working so closely with farmers.
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a mixed journey for me to get to the position that I'm in. So I actually started off in the research sphere, researching around on-farm emissions and opportunities to reduce emissions across farming businesses. And then after a bit of a stint working in research, I transitioned across to working directly with farmers, which is something that I really love. So I work within TerraWise, as you mentioned, and TerraWise is a division of Plant Farm. And so our work, the work that our team does, primarily centres around emissions accounting, on-farm carbon projects, but also around on-farm data, natural capital, and precision ag, because those things are also closely connected. So being part of Plant Farm means that we get to work alongside farm business consultants and agronomists every day, and that's really, really valuable for us because it shapes the advice that we give and keeps us really grounded in what's actually happening on farm.
It's something, particularly carbon emissions, that is being discussed more than ever at the moment. And this article that you've put out, 6 lessons from the paddock, what actually works on farm, it's great. I'll quickly list off some of these so that you don't have to, Danu. So if it doesn't improve the business, it won't last. Make the most of all your land. There's no silver bullet. One size doesn't fit all. Technology is your friend. That's a big one you were just mentioning there about precision ag, and transition and obligation to an opportunity. So there's a lot that was covered there. What made you put these lessons out there?
Well, I guess the questions that we kept coming back to in our work isn't whether farmers should engage with emissions accounting or on-farm carbon projects. It was how. So how do they do it in a way that genuinely supports the business rather than it becoming another compliance burden or another administrative layer on top of everything else? And so these lessons that I've written about come from real conversations with farming businesses. You know, what was moving the needle, what wasn't, and why. And so some of them, as you listed, might seem pretty obvious when you hear them, but that's kind of the point, because the obvious things are often what gets forgotten when the noise gets loud. And the noise is pretty loud. There's a lot coming at farmers right now with new requirements and products, pressures. And so our aim is really to cut through all of that and to the things that really hold up in a business.
One thing you're very clear on, lesson number 1, if it doesn't improve the business, it won't last. So, farmers, they hear the words like carbon or sustainability. What questions should they be asking to work out if it's actually making sense for them?
Yeah, exactly. And when we're talking about improving the business here, we're talking about profit and productivity. And I guess the first thing to recognize is that profitability in this context isn't just about this season's cash flow. When we're looking at it, it is long-term returns, risk, complexity, how well something fits into their existing system. So, an emission reduction change that adds complexity or ties up more labor or reduces flexibility, it carries a cost even if it looks good on paper. And so that full picture is what's really needed for something to stack up. And so the 3 questions that we would encourage them to ask are, does this reduce my risk or add to it? Secondly, does it actually fit my system, or does my system have to change to accommodate it? And thirdly, what does it cost me not to understand my own emissions numbers and the opportunities that carbon might present? And it's that last one that is really important, because the entities that farming businesses engage with, they are making assumptions about emissions. And so for a farming business perspective, they want to be the ones with their data, not relying on someone else's guesses about their farm. And so while a carbon account might not change their cash flow today, it brings farm data together in ways that many farming businesses have never reviewed. So because emissions accounting requires a commodity level assessment, it really allows enterprise and paddock level analysis that surface efficiencies that aren't visible in standard annual reporting, and that has real business value too.
In another lesson here, you say there's no silver bullet, no one size fits all solution. So, for someone who maybe feels a bit overloaded by all the advice and options out there at the moment, do you have any sort of practical ways to cut through that noise?
Yeah, absolutely. So the overload is real, and we hear that. There's a lot coming at farmers from a lot of directions, and it can be confusing, and at times it can be conflicting. And so the practical filter that we use is that every option they consider involves trade-offs across four key things. So emission reduction potential, cost, logistics, and impact on productivity. So nothing is a free win. So if a business or someone is promising a single solution that fixes everything, that tracks you significantly towards net zero, that's the signal to get a second opinion. The other thing worth holding on to is that two farms right next door to each other can see two very different outcomes from the same mitigating practice. And it's not because one is better managed, it's because context always matters. So, your soils, rainfall, enterprise mix, labour, capital management, all of those, it shapes what actually works. And so the most effective approach isn't one big solution. It's actually layering multiple small productivity focused changes over time, because it's those improvements that compound. And I think this is particularly relevant right now with input costs as they are and margins under pressure. The real question is where more can be done with less. And so variable rate technology is a really great example here. So the driver for most is precision fertilizer placement and more efficient fuel use, not emissions. But the emissions benefit follows from that same decision. So we know carbon isn't high on the priority list, but if it stops being viewed as a separate obligation sitting alongside everything else and instead gets integrated into business decisions that are already being made, then the emissions outcome then becomes a co-benefit of doing good business, not just another item on the list. And we strongly believe that it's those businesses that take that integrated approach now that are also positioning themselves well for what's ahead with supply chain requirements, market access, financing conditions, which are all moving in one direction. So those good decisions made today definitely have a compounding business value into the future.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Turning carbon from an obligation into an opportunity. If someone's listening and they want to just take one small step this year, what would you suggest maybe they start with?
Very easy. The very first thing we'd suggest, and this is from experience ourselves, is getting their records in order. And that's genuinely something they can start tomorrow. So number one, move from paper to digital, even if that is just a clear Excel spreadsheet to start with. Number two, record actuals, not just what was planned, because if there's an unplanned spray or a crop change that isn't captured somewhere, it effectively doesn't exist in their data. And that matters to us because we are looking at it from a commodity lens rather than a whole business lens. And this does flow through to their numbers. Number three, follow the money. So link invoices and BAS statements to production records, because connecting those financials with production makes the analysis even more powerful and it streamlines things. And lastly, update records as they go. 5 minutes now during the year really does save hours at the year end when audits and reporting come around. And look, that might all seem really basic, but it is the foundation. If you get that right, everything else, the reporting, the analysis, understanding where emissions sit within the business, it becomes so much easier. And more importantly, it puts them in control of their own numbers. So rather than having supply chains or lenders make assumptions about their farm, they have the data to tell their own story and make their own decisions about where those carbon opportunities sit within their business.
Love it. Basically, get your records straight, connect up those financials. And personally, I love an Excel spreadsheet. I think it's a great place to start. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Danielle.
Thanks so much, Holly. Appreciate it.
For more information and to read plenty more interesting articles as well, go to the Plan Farm website, planfarm.com.au/TerraWise. You're on